A, your host for Pulse on every Friday night on this station. And tonight I have a wonderful guest, William H. Kennedy, a gentleman that's done a tremendous amount of study into the history of the occult, some real fascinating information. He's also written a couple of books, two books. One's called Lucifer's Lodge, the other's called Satanic Crime. And I think you'll all be very fascinated at some of the material that Brother Kennedy brings out today. William Kennedy, how are you doing today?
Very good. Thank you for having me, Steve.
All right. Well, the listening audience is going to definitely want to know how you got involved in the studying of the occult and why you got involved into it.
Well, it's quite interesting. I'm 47 years old, and I have an academic background in philosophy. I have a master's degree from San Francisco State University in philosophy, and since I was a little kid, I was fascinated with paranormal subjects, primarily from television. There were TV shows like Dark Shadows, which was about a vampire, and there were other television shows. There was a show called The Sixth Sense that starred Gary Collins, which was the original X-Files TV show. It was called The Sixth Sense. That was on in the early 1970s, and it was about a paranormal researcher. And when I was just a little kid, 8 years old, I knew that's what I wanted to do when I grew up. I knew I wanted to investigate these kinds of things. I even went to the library near my house and found the occult section with all the books on it right when I was a little kid. So I was kind of born to really look at this whole phenomenon of paranormal or occult studies. And it's a pretty general thing. Just to let people know, I'm Christian myself, pretty non-denominational these days, but I'm from a Roman Catholic background. And over the years, after I got my degree, I got to know Father Malachi Martin, who was a very famous Roman Catholic priest who had written a book, Hostage to the Devil, on demonic possession. Now, I met him in 1996 in New York City, and I went down in New York. It was right in January of 1996 that I went down to his house in Manhattan and met with him. And back then he told me, I'm from the Boston, Massachusetts area, and he told me that Cardinal Bernard Law, who was the Roman Catholic cardinal up here, was running a pedophile ring.
Wow.
Of Catholic priests, and that some of these pedophiles were Satanists. He told me this in 1996, and I did tell a few other people this. Just to fast forward ahead, Father Martin died back in 1999, and a few years after that, in January of 2002, the Boston Globe broke a story that said Cardinal Bernard Law of Boston was in fact running a pedophile ring. And what I did over the next 2 years is I just collected all of the newspaper clippings on all of the cases right from the internet of the whole scandal in the Boston Archdiocese. Now, the other part of what Father Malachi Martin told me was that some of these pedophile priests were Satanists. Now, when this story first broke, I was quite shocked, but I was still skeptical about the Satanism part, and I said, well, I'll just wait and see. If anything that looks occult or satanic pops up, I'll certainly address it, but I'll wait to see. In other words, I won't go looking for it. I'll just wait for what articles come out in the Boston Globe and Boston Herald and a few other newspapers in Ireland as well. And what I did was I didn't have to wait long. A couple months after that, it came out that Monsignor Frederick Ryan, who was a high-ranking official in the Boston Archdiocese, was molesting boys for years, and that he had tattooed a boy with a devil figure.
Wow.
Okay, this came out in the Boston Globe and Herald. Now, for people who want verification of the things I'm going to say, they can go to my web page, williamhkennedy.com, and there is a ritual abuse multimedia page you can link to from williamhkennedy.com that will give you all of the newspaper articles and all of the priests that I'm talking about tonight. So I'm backing up what I'm saying primarily with articles from the Boston Globe, which won a Pulitzer Prize in 2003 for its coverage of the pedophile scandal, and the Boston Herald, and both these papers really did extensive articles and research into what happened and what went wrong in the Catholic Church. So those are my sources. So I know a lot of what I say sounds far-fetched, but I have the documentation to back up my statements. There again, williamhkennedy.com. Now to get back to the story, Monsignor Frederick Ryan had tattooed this boy with a devil figure and sexually abused him. Now, Monsignor Ryan also had abused many young boys all over the archdiocese, but the one with this case, that in occult terms or satanic terms, that's called the devil's mark. That's branding or tattooing someone with a satanic symbol. It's a Luciferian initiation ceremony. And that's really what we're looking at. Now, what I did again is I waited for another case to come out. Another big occult-related case was that of Father Sean Fortune. He was a priest in Ireland, and his story came out big when the pedophile scandal hit here. He was a Roman Catholic priest, but he was also a practicing Satanist. This is a very bizarre case. And he would molest little boys, and when the parents of the little boys found out about it and confronted them, he would threaten them. He would say, like, Satan will haunt your children if you turn me into the police. Or your next child will be born crippled if you turn me into the police. He used to threaten them with hexes and curses.
Wow.
And Father Fortune, very strange, he committed suicide the night before he was supposed to go on trial. But he did a lot of bizarre things like that. And we tend to laugh at that, but you have to remember the rural Irish, he was in a rural area, they still have a very magical worldview. So they're almost superstitious. So for a priest to threaten them with a hex is a very real thing in the way they think. You know, we're Americans, and I'm Irish, from an Irish Catholic background, and I don't understand this myself, but the Irish are very superstitious.
Right. Well, my family comes from a British background, and I know that even to this day, most of them are still highly superstitious, you know. So I can understand a bit of that background.
Right. It's a different worldview than what we have as Americans, which is very scientific and technological compared to other countries and the way people are raised in other nations. But that's what I say about Father Fortune. That was a really big case. Now, just another case that I came together while doing this research was that of Gerald Robinson. Gerald Robinson was a Catholic priest in the Midwestern United States who was investigated for murdering a nun.
Wow.
About 20 years ago, they found a nun murdered in an airport chapel with a row of candles around her head and an inverted cross carved into her chest.
That's really disgusting.
And, oh yeah, it's horrible. But he was a suspect in this murder of this nun 20 years ago. Now, this was in Cincinnati. And
yeah, that's not far from us here.
Yeah, this happened in Cincinnati. Oh, this is unbelievable. Now, Gerald Robinson, many years later, when the whole pedophile scandal broke in the Roman Catholic Church, the case of the murdered nun came out again because Father Robinson's name was mentioned as being a cohort in much of the molesting of children in that area. Now, it's quite a bizarre series of events occurred. As this came out, there were accusations of satanic ritual abuse, not only in the murder of the nun, but in some of the cases that these women who came forward after the archdiocese came out with a call for anyone who was a victim of a rape priest after this was in this was in Toledo, Ohio. Let me correct myself, not Cincinnati. Right. I know it was Ohio, but this was in Toledo, and it came out that he and another priest sexually abused a young girl in a coffin many years before, and I don't want to get too much into the detail, but they sexually abused her with animals.
All right.
And dedicated her soul and her body to Satan. Now this is what came out as again the Toledo Blade used me as a source when they conducted this case. I was an expert, and I explained the situation to a couple people on their research team at the Toledo Blade in Toledo, Ohio. So this Father Robinson was sexually abusing priests. Now, story after story kept coming out after 2002 that in 2004 I put together all these articles. I weaved them all together. I wrote an introduction and I wrote some interpretations, but basically I took all these articles about these pedophile priests, summarized them, put really good sources, and came out with the book Lucifer's Lodge, Satanic Ritual Abuse in the Catholic Church. Now, if people just go to Google and put William H. Kennedy, Lucifer's Lodge, they can actually find it for free online. It went out of print, and I'm going to bring it back in print. But for right now, just Google Lucifer's Lodge in Google, and you can get my book, Lucifer's Lodge, for free, which has all of this information on the pedophile priests.
It's so amazing, and what you're saying is that there's quite a bit of this occult activity amongst Catholic priests. Is that right?
Now, I want to make it clear, I'm not saying that every Catholic priest who was arrested for pedophilia is involved in any form of satanic ritual abuse. However, what I am saying is that some of these Catholic priests certainly were involved in satanic ritual abuse, and they seem to have had a network.
Okay, well, regardless of that, it seems like anybody that would take on the cloth, a man of taking on ministry or the priesthood in Catholicism, molesting children and being a pedophile definitely doesn't seem congruent with the idea of being a priest. So there's something really askew there in the first place.
Oh yeah, I mean, you got to remember that pedophiles will always be attracted to any organizations where they have access to children, private access to children, and lack of suspicion. And that's why you get a lot of pedophiles, volunteer for the Boy Scouts of America, I'm afraid. And I'm a former Boy Scout. And but that happens. It's a strange thing. They will gravitate to professions like school teachers to go where the children are. They're attracted, they're sick, they're attracted to preteen children. They like to have sex with preteen children, and they gravitate and network together and enter professions where they have private access to children, like a Catholic priest, like a school teacher, like a daycare worker. Now, I'm not there again. I'm not saying everyone in that profession is involved with satanic ritual abuse, but some of them are, I'm afraid. And that's what I really brought out in my first book, Lucifer's Lodge, Satanic Ritual Abuse in the Catholic Church, which people can get for free online. Just Google Lucifer's Lodge, and you will get all of the where the articles are in the Boston Globe and Herald, which confirm everything I'm saying about satanic ritual abuse in the Catholic Church. And I also want to point out, Steve, this is important. I fully understand that there were people wrongfully sent to prison back in the 1980s for false cases of satanic ritual abuse. So I'm not hopping on this to cause some sort of satanic panic. And, I always thought the Fells Acre case, which was right near where I live, the next city over, I thought those people shouldn't have gone to jail, and I always said so throughout the years. So there were people wrongly sent to prison in the 1980s here and in England for false reports of satanic ritual abuse, but they were so small a number. It's a great tragedy for the people this happened to. Don't get me wrong, I'm not minimizing their suffering. I pray for these people. But it wasn't a huge problem when you consider that it was under 100 people. Now, a lot of people were wrongly sent to prison in the 1980s for rape, for murder, for arson, who turned out to be completely innocent. Now, because some people who were accused of rape, murder, and arson are later proved to be completely innocent, does that mean that we no longer investigate rape, murder, and arson? I mean, do we just ignore someone says, oh, he murdered that person, I saw it. Well, do the police say, well, we had these people who went to jail wrongfully for murder, so we're not going to investigate the murders anymore? That's what we're really looking at from a legal perspective, because satanic ritual abuse turned out to be a very real thing. It's out there. It's not common. It's not, most Satanism is harmless teenage dabblers and not too much to worry about. But you do have this undercurrent of extremely evil child molesting Satanists, some of whom infiltrated the Roman Catholic Church.
That's pretty amazing. When you think about it, though, there's a huge occult undercurrent going on today, and we see it brought out into modern media with all the Twilight and Harry Potter and all this kind of stuff that's being brought. So it's like it's become more and more appealing over the last few years, and you see a really big resurgence or an increase in all the occult activity as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, occultism, whatever you want to call it, the New Age or paranormal or supernatural, or however you want to label this phenomenon that we roughly call a cult, it's gigantic. It's a huge business. It's not just exploding here, it's exploding around the world. People pay billions of dollars a year, even still with the bad economy in the United States. Billions are spent on occult activities and every aspect of it, from New Age fairs to tarot readings to alternative medicine types of things. It's quite incredible. Now, the big critic of this is Richard Dawkins, who's a British atheist professor, but he's really good. One thing I like about him is that he brings out all the statistics of how many billions are paid by people for everything from aura readings to fortune telling of all kinds, numerology, you name it. Someone's out there spending money on it, and the internet has only made this whole phenomenon even larger. And the New Age movement on the whole is just a new name for older occult things. Now, one thing you said, Steve, that's very true. Our mass media, television, and the internet is bombarded with the occult. The Yahoo webpage has an astrology click right on their homepage. So that shows you how big and important the occult is to people. It's on the number 112 search engine in the world, Yahoo. It's quite amazing, and they right from there you can click right onto your daily astrology reading, and they even have hourly astrology readings. So it's quite extensive and permeates our whole culture. The occult has always been embedded in television. Just consider the two biggest stars of the 1950s, Jackie Gleason, the comedian, and Elvis Presley, were heavily involved in the occult in their personal lives. They didn't make it very public, but hugely involved with occult activity. I was quite surprised when I learned this about Elvis Presley myself, but he believed in reincarnation. He did numerology. So even the people, if they don't in our culture who are big, even if they don't publicly espouse occult ideas, they are many times in their personal lives almost addicted to it, and they just don't go public with it. And those are two major figures I found out about. Again, Jackie Gleason and Elvis Presley, hugely involved in the occult. So I always laugh when I see people who are afraid of the Christian right who say, oh, they want a Christian theocracy. Well, guess what? We're in an occult theocracy now.
Right, and we might need to establish that a little bit more, because I think a lot of people are going to kind of shrug at that. What you did bring up, I knew about Elvis Presley's involvement in the occult, and I knew he was a follower of Madame Blavatsky, the Theosophical Society founder. She wrote a whole bunch of books. I forget some of them, but I know that they are really standard works in the occult. But Jackie Gleason, that was a new name for me. I didn't know anything about his occult involvement. So.
Oh yeah, if you go to WilliamHKennedy.com, I did a whole audio documentary called The Occult World of Jackie Gleason. It's for free at WilliamHKennedy.com, and I point out that Jackie Gleason from a very young age was fascinated with the paranormal, and he even used to donate to Duke University, which had the first psychic research center in the country.
Well, that's very interesting.
Yeah, he donated thousands of dollars, and in his personal life he had such a large collection of occult books that when he died in 1987 there were thousands of books on the occult. The whole collection was donated to the University of Miami by his widow, and they were happy to have it because it was an extensive collection of occult books from the 1930s. Now, Jackie Gleason used to go on the #1 occult radio show called the Long John Nebel Show, which was the Art Bell of the 1950s. Long John Nebel had the first really big UFO occult radio, nationally syndicated radio program for 20 years, from 57 to 77. Then Larry King took his spot, actually. But Jackie Gleason went on Long John Nebel, and he offered $10,000 for anyone who could show him a psychic phenomenon or a UFO. And then later on, he wrote the introduction to Long John Nebel's book about his life, and in there he offered $1 million for someone who could show him proof of a UFO or paranormal phenomenon. And there are many rumors that Jackie Gleason met with Richard Nixon and discussed UFOs. I don't know how many of those are true and how many of them are not, but it is clear that Jackie Gleason was a major fan of the occult for many years, and he even wanted to do a documentary on UFOs once, but CBS shot it down. I have the clip of Jackie talking about that in my book, WilliamHKennedy.com, and the book is called The Occult World of Jackie Gleason, but that's free too. I'm letting everyone know how to get all my stuff free. So
great. I have a question for you, Brother Kennedy, on the issue of UFOs. What do you think this UFO phenomenon is? I mean, do you?
I'll just tell you before you give me any options, Steve, so no one will think that I'm swayed by your beliefs. I think UFOs are actually diabolical hallucinations, that they are actually from the devil. And a friend of mine, Timothy Green Beckley, a UFO researcher, just has come out with a wonderful book. I believe it's called From Hell and Back in a Flying Saucer. And he collected articles and stories about people's whose encounters with UFOs and alleged extraterrestrials have concluded that these were demonic beings who are attacking them spiritually. And this is their testimonies.
Well, that's very interesting, because that's something similar to what I had heard, that there are people that were high up in the occult that instead of these UFOs coming from outer space or something like that, there was some sort of demonstration in which they actually came up out of the sea or out of the ground or something like that. And there's this idea of an inner Earth or something, that these beings lived in the inner Earth or something. Of course, I don't think that there's like the Lord of the Rings inner Earth or something like that, but there's some sort of supernatural phenomenon. These things aren't actual space beings coming to this planet. There's something demonic going on there.
Oh yeah, well I believe that, Steve, is simply for two reasons. Number one, if these were an advanced alien power, they would conquer us, or if they chose to hide themselves, they would covertly help us, like give us the cure to cancer, or something that their advanced technology would afford them. There again, they'd either take us over or they'd help us. And these beings who are met on these so-called UFOs and alien abductions, these beings just seem to torment the human beings they encounter. They do a lot of what I call soul damage. And nothing they're doing, these people are very unpleasant. And I used to know Dr. John Mack, who wrote a book about alien abductions. And he was a psychiatrist at Harvard University. He passed away in a car accident a couple of years ago, very tragic. But it's interesting because these people who felt they were contacted by aliens or abducted by aliens, what he used to do is throw every kind of lie detector at them that Harvard University had at the time. They would have a body language screener, and they would use polygraphs, lie detectors, every form of lie detection that they could throw at these people. It showed that they were telling the truth, that they did in fact believe that they were abducted by alien beings. And these reports have gone back centuries. They used to call them incubi and succubi in medieval Europe. These are spirits of the night who seem to take you away to very bad places. There's certainly nightmarish elements to all of this. Maybe these are nightmares that people believe. I've heard those theories. But it's much more to them than a nightmare. They seem to say this is a very solid, real, concrete experience for them. And my interpretation, and I told Dr. Mack this, I remember I was having coffee with him, I said, I think it's demonic. And he said that, yeah, there's a lot of explanations. Brad Steiger, who's a famous UFO guy at the Rents page, he has 17 explanations for the UFO phenomenon, and one of them is that they are demonically inspired, and that's really the one I kind of go with. And it's funny, you used to hear a lot about this in the 1970s. I used to watch a lot of preachers on Sunday, and they used to do specials on UFOs and specials on all sorts of things, Eastern religions. You don't see as much of it now. Someone I still watch that I recommend to your listeners is a guy named John Ankerberg, who every Sunday night on cable TV, I'm not sure which stations he's on now, you'd have to check at his webpage, but he does a wonderful show where he pits things like UFOs against the Bible and Christianity versus cults. It's very worth watching for people who want a Christian perspective on the New Age movement. There again, John Ankerberg. That's more from a ministry Christian apologetics point of view, which on all my web pages at williamhkennedy.com, there's all kinds of multimedia pages which links to free documentaries, primarily on the occult. I have an occult history multimedia page, a satanic crime multimedia page, which has tons of free links to all kinds of documentaries and docudramas and audios and articles and ebooks on occult subjects. And in every heading, I try to do three things. Like, let's say I have alchemy, which was the medieval practice of trying to turn base metals into gold, which became kind of a mystical and magical science that was unchristian in many ways, but it involved turning base metals into gold and purifying the human soul. Now, if I have that, I will look at it from three perspectives. Number one, I'll have a general documentary about it, usually from the History Channel or the BBC. Then I'll give the skeptics' view, people like James Randi and Michael Shermer, the skeptical community. And then I usually try and give the Christian interpretation, which would be like John Ankerberg's article on alchemy. So I try and be as diverse with each subject as I can be, giving the Christian, skeptical, and journalistic perspectives on these phenomenon. But as we're going to discuss a little later, people have to understand that just because they're not interested in the occult or religion, the problem is the people who run our government certainly are interested in the occult. And it's very bizarre. They keep this extremely secret. And that really leads me to discussing my next book, which was called Satanic Crime, A Threat in the New Millennium, which came out in 2006. And people can purchase that at williamhkennedy.com at a very reasonable price.
All right, Brother Kennedy, we're coming up on a break, and I just want to take a few seconds. I'm talking with William H. Kennedy, a gentleman who's done a lot of research into the occult and paranormal activity. We'll be back in just a few minutes to continue this conversation. Okay, we're back. This is Steve Day, and I'm here tonight with William H. Kennedy. We're having a discussion on the occult, paranormal activity. We were just discussing UFOs and stuff like that. This is not Art Bell. This is Pulse every Friday night on this station. But William H. Kennedy, you were talking about your new book, and I want to give you some time to go ahead and go into that.
Okay, it's not a new book, but it's my most recent book from 2006 called Satanic Crime, A Threat in the New Millennium, which people can get at williamhkennedy.com. And basically what I do in this book is three things. Number one, I wrote a general introduction to modern Satanism called A Brief History of Modern Satanism. That's my introductory chapter. And I cover the Satanism movement from Aleister Crowley, who lived from 1875 to 1947, through the Church of Satan and Anton LaVey, Temple of Set. I get into all the contemporary satanic leaders, Peter Gilmore, Boyd Rice, Shane Bugbee. I talk about all these people in my book, Satanic Crime, in the introduction. And I just give a breakdown of the who, what, where, when, and why of the modern Satanism movement in part one of my book. Now, the next big batch of chapters are case studies of serial killers who also turned out to be Satanists. This is the vast majority of the book, and I go over people like Charles Manson, Richard Ramirez, who was the son of, he was a satanic killer in California. I've got Richard Berkowitz, the son of Sam Killer, who was in New York. He was tied to all satanic types of groups. And I also have some other serial killers who aren't as well known as the big three there. Manson, Berkowitz, and Ramirez are really the big three satanic serial killers that everyone's familiar with. But unfortunately, there are a lot of more of them out there now. I have a whole chapter on Ricky Casso. Ricky Casso was a boy in the mid-'80s who murdered his best friend, one of his best friends, Gary Lower, in a satanic ceremony in New York. And as he stabbed his friend Gary to death, Ricky made him say you love Satan, as he was stabbing him to death in a human sacrifice ritual. So I was interviewed by the Discovery Channel, a guy named Christian Page, who's a filmmaker for Discovery. He's up in Quebec, Canada. He's in a company called Blue Planet Productions. And he filmed me and has made a documentary out of my book, specifically on the Ricky Casso case. And I was filmed by him a little while ago, and that documentary is due to come out in the next year or so. It will be a documentary on Satanist children who kill, and I am one of the featured speakers. I'll be on Discovery Investigations Network very soon. So my second book, Satanic Crime, took a lot of interesting turns because the guy who did the cover for it, Adam Scott Miller, quite amazingly won a scholarship for a master's degree in art at the Mass College of Art, famous Provincetown Art School in Massachusetts, and he used the cover as part of his portfolio. But also that cover for Satanic Crime in Lucifer's Lodge back in 2006, it was featured in a big New York art show called Things Got Legs by Matt Boa, who's this famous artist down there. And he used my book covers and recorded my voice for an art show on America's fascination with conspiracies. So my second book, Satanic Crime, took me in directions I'd never thought, in that I impacted the art world in some way, which was never a goal of mine. I just hired the best artist I could for the cover of my books, you know.
All right.
So that was kind of some serendipity in my life, a very pleasant surprise. Now, the last chapter of my book in Satanic Crime goes into, I take this into a different direction. I get into the Luciferian connection with elite secret societies. And I focus on 3 secret societies primarily. The Skull and Bones Society at Yale University, the Bohemian Grove, which is in California, and the Bilderberg Group, which meets every year usually in Europe, which is made up of all the chief royalty, politicians, and industrialists in the world. So I look at these 3 organizations in great detail in the final chapter of my book, Satanic Crime, and I conclude that all 3 of these organizations have satanic rituals as part and parcel of their existence. It's just what they do, and that many of the great power brokers in the world are members of these satanic secret societies. They are either in one of these secret societies or their closest advisors are in one of these secret societies. It's either one or the other, but in either case, these 3 secret societies pretty much dominate the world economy.
That's a very interesting point. You know, one of the things that happens to come up when I'm talking to people about the idea of secret societies, people have a hard time with the idea that there are, first of all, these occultic secret societies out there, and number 2, and more importantly, the idea that these secret societies have any sort of power at all in today's politics or in the world stage. You're saying that both of those are true, that these secret societies are very powerful and they are out there.
Oh yes, definitely so, Steve. And we'll start, I'll just give you some background information. And there again, if you go to williamhkennedy.com and click on my Satanic Crime page, You can link to a lot of free documentaries on a lot of the information I'm about to give you. So I know a lot of what I say seems far-fetched and hard for people to believe. That's why I put up these multimedia pages to back up what I'm saying. And for example, the first organization I'm talking about, the Skull and Bones Society at Yale University, if people go to williamhkennedy.com, click on the Satanic Crime page, they can click right onto the Skull and Bones section, and they can watch the 60-minute CBS News report on the Skull and Bones Society and how powerful they are. So what I've discovered about the Skull and Bones is quite fascinating. It was founded in 1832 at Yale University after there was a big scandal with Freemasonic groups being in control of the government. There was an anti-Masonic political party back there, the first one in history. So the Freemasons were essentially banned from Yale a little bit before 1832. So what a group of elites who wanted to continue with a Freemasonic type organization did is they went over to a Masonic fraternity in Germany at a university that was affiliated with Yale. We're not sure which one, but they got a charter to start a chapter of the Skull and Bones, which was a Masonic type order from a German university. Again, they took the charter to Yale. They founded what's called the Russell Trust. And the Russell Trust actually owns all of the land that Yale University rests on, and Yale pays them some token fee a year to stay there. So the Skull and Bones actually owns the land that Yale University rests on, which is quite interesting. Who runs who? But anyway, the Skull and Bones Society, they built a temple called the Tombs, which is kind of a castle type structure or a mausoleum type structure right in the center of Yale's campus. Now, I will tell you some of the people who were members of the Skull and Bones Society. President George W. Bush. Bush 1 and 2 were both members of the Skull and Bones Society. John Kerry was a member of the Skull and Bones Society. Dulles, the founder of the CIA, was a member of the Skull and Bones Society. Many famous families involved with food, like Heinz and Pillsbury, were members of the Skull and Bones Society. An amazing, amazing collection of extremely powerful men and women. Austin Goolsbee, President Obama's first chief financial advisor, was a member of the Skull and Bones Society at Yale. Now, what's the problem with the Skull and Bones Society at Yale, you might ask, Steve, and as may some of your listeners? Well, quite frankly, they practice a form of Satanism there. How this is proved was by a woman wrote a book, Secrets of the Tomb. Alexandra Robbins is her name, and she actually went to members of the Skull and Bones Society and secretly spoke with them. She was a Yale graduate. She's not a Skull and Bones Society member, but she was always curious about it. And through former members who were willing to talk to her incognito, anonymously, gave her many of the rituals that were performed inside the Skull and Bones Society. Now, what were you going to say, Steve?
What are some of these rituals that you're speaking of?
Okay, very bizarre stuff, and if you got kids around, you may not want them to listen to this. This edition of the Pulse is more for adults.
Okay.
I would say. They do things like get into a coffin and masturbate and discuss their sexual histories, for one. That's their business if they want to do that. But where the Satanism comes in is actually with their initiation ceremony. Now, they're taken there by hooded men who are dressed up like the Grim Reaper. Members of the Skull and Bones Society dress up kind of like demons when they take their initiates for their final ritual. Now, they're taken in there. The oldest member of the tallest member is called the Big Devil, and the smallest member shortest member of the Skull and Bones is called the Little Devil in this ritual. They are made to drink some kind of red liquid from a human skull. Then they are brought before three figures they come into physical contact. One is dressed as the devil with horns. One is dressed like the Pope with his foot on a skull. And the third is dressed like a black knight. Now the initiate comes before the student dressed like the devil, and he's whipped by the devil's tail. He is forced to kiss the foot of the Pope figure, whose foot is on a skull, and then he goes before the Black Knight, who initiates him a Knight of the Skull and Bones. Now, what we're looking at here really is the infernal trinity. It's the inversion of Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. The fellow dressed like the devil represents Lucifer. The fellow dressed in the Pope's outfit represents the Antichrist, or the earthly expression of the devil. And the Black Knight who initiates the initiate is Satan, the accuser, or the pronouncer. So what we're looking at here is, it's kind of like a reverse Christian baptism or confirmation, if you will, in an infernal way. It's an inversion, an infernal inversion of Christian ceremonies, where these men, as I say, like John Kerry and George W. Bush, showed their allegiance to the Skull and Bones. Now, it's amazing, a fellow named Ron Rosenbaum, who was another Yale graduate who was not in the Skull and Bones, secretly filmed another part of their ritual that takes part in their courtyard, where members come out there and they perform a mock human sacrifice in front of the fellow who's dressed in the devil's costume. And you can see this film there again, WilliamHKennedy.com. Go to the Satanic Crime multimedia page, click on that, click on Skull and Bones, and this will take you to the section where you can see the free video of Ron Rosenbaum's film, a part of the Skull and Bones ceremony, where a mock human sacrifice is seen, filmed, where they even kiss what looks like a human skull. Now, if you go there, you can also see someone up the wall of their courtyard, which is behind their building, and they filmed all around the Skull and Bones courtyard, and it was full of occult stuff. They had a spinning wheel, a wheel of fortune, standing up against a wall, which looked a lot like the wheel of fortune you would see in a tarot deck card. It was an occult wheel of fortune. What they used that for, I do not know. There was also a very strange thing. It was a fountain or a font which was built into the wall of the courtyard, and it had two Grim Reaper figures, skeletons, who were staring at each other, and they were holding a skull in the hands between them. Now, the guy who films this, you can see what look like traces of blood in the font of this diabolical fountain they have. I don't know, they might be sacrificing animals. I don't, it does seem to be blood in this. Again, you can see this, WilliamHKennedy.com, Satanic Crime multimedia page. Click down to Skull and Bones. You can see this film itself. You can see what the Wheel of Fortune, and I call it the Fountain of Death, look like in the Skull and Bones courtyard. So it's very bizarre, because when you consider that Bush and Kerry, when they were both running for president, they were both, Tim Russert, the big mainstream media interviewer, asked them both about the Skull and Bones Society on national television, and they both refused to talk about it, which they were ordered to do. They are not allowed to divulge anything about the Skull and Bones to non-members. Now, it's very strange, because when the ceremony of the Skull and Bones Society is over, the members are cleaned up and they're taken away by private helicopters to an island that the Skull and Bones own. They own a remote island on a lake, and they go there and they meet all the other members of the Skull and Bones. And there's about 800 alive at any time, between 5 and 800. It's the 14 a year are initiated into it, so it stays pretty steady in the 500s. But the most powerful people in the world, the founder of FedEx was a Skull and Bones member. It's quite amazing. And these rich and powerful people like FedEx, which now controls most of the packaging in communist China, if you did not know. Most of the package delivery is actually done by FedEx in communist China. The fellow who founded it was involved in a Luciferian secret society whose part of its final initiation ceremony involves paying homage to Lucifer and the infernal trinity. So we're looking at some very sick occult rituals on the part of the most powerful and influential people at the top of our political and economic pyramid, which is how we all live. It's
right.
It's quite amazing.
We have about 10 minutes left. Is there a way that we could briefly cover the Bohemian Grove and Bilderberg?
Sure, I could give you brief breakdowns of both those organizations.
All right.
The Bohemian Grove was founded in 1872 in San Francisco by the families of rich railroad barons, primarily. This is when the West first got its big money. By 1872, the railroad was all built, and there were very rich people in San Francisco who wanted a more cultural edge to their lives, primarily their wives. In 1872, they formed the Bohemian Club, which was originally a club for the richest people in the Bay Area to meet. Only men could join. Now, from the very beginning of the Bohemian Club, there were occult rituals being performed. What the club did is they eventually purchased a huge tract of land in Northern California, which they call the Bohemian Grove. And every year, they have a big ritual out there where the richest and most powerful people in the world, again, the Bush family, George I and George II, were both Skull and Bones members and Bohemian Grove members, as was Arnold Schwarzenegger, Merv Griffin, all kinds of people in money and government. And a fellow in the year 2000 named Alex Jones, a famous reporter, hopped the wall of the Bohemian Grove and filmed the ceremony they were doing. What these rich people were doing is they were dressed in Ku Klux Klan type uniforms, and they had a ceremony before an owl god. They set up this giant owl, and they had another mock human sacrifice where they burned the effigy of a body, which they called the cremation of care ceremony. Again, Alex Jones filmed this. You can see it for free at williamhkennedy.com Satanic Crime page. You can watch this film, and what they do, it's very strange. They all hold these torches and perform this diabolical ceremony before an owl. They also have other satanic rites, a different one every year. They have what they call hijinks or plays, which are separate rituals. And they've had ones with titles like Diablo, Merlin. So they seem to perform very bizarre occult rituals. Now, there again, Jimmy Carter was a member of the Bohemian Grove. Richard Nixon was a member of the Bohemian Grove. Ronald Reagan was a member of the Bohemian Grove. What are our presidents doing worshiping an owl figure out in California? Now, just to finalize on that, there's also reports of gay sex. A gay porn star named Chad Savage in 2004 showed up at the Bohemian Grove to work as a valet. Now, Chad Savage gets $20,000 a day to perform in gay porn films. So what was he getting a day to go to the Bohemian Grove? And I don't think he was just pouring drinks. So that's all I'll say about the Skull and Bones. Now the Bohemian Grove. Now I'll go to the Bilderberg Group. The Bilderberg Group very quickly was founded by the Prince of New Netherlands in the 1950s at the Bilderberg Hotel near Amsterdam, and it is a collection of, there again, the most richest and powerful people on earth. all of the nobility of Europe and all up-and-coming politicians. Tony Blair was a Bilderberger. Bill Clinton was a Bilderberger. They went to the Bilderberg, then they became Prime Minister and President of the United States. So these people meet every year, and what's bizarre about it is they've been tied to a serial killer named Marc Dutroux, who was actually capturing children, raping them, and training them as sex slaves for a Bilderberg-type organization. Members of the Bilderbergers were implicated in sex rituals performed by the infamous Belgian serial killer Marc Dutroux. Again, Steve, people can get tons and tons of free information on all of this. WilliamHKennedy.com, the Satanic Crime Multimedia page. You can just click right down and get all the free information you want on the Skull and Bones Society, the Bohemian Grove, and the Bilderberg Group. And if I mix them up a little talking about them, it's all the same membership anyway.
Well, one thing that I think is really important to bring out is that there is a satanic conspiracy going on. There's all of these different secret societies out there that are working both openly and behind the scenes, pulling strings politically, economically, to bring about this new world order that everyone's been talking about since, the 1960s, 1970s. And there's a lot going on that most of the Christian world is completely asleep to, and yet it is dark. There are more children showing up missing every year in this country than ever before. And most of these children, they never see their mom or dad again. They end up as, like you brought out, pedophile. They end up in pedophile rings or abused in some sort of way. And this is a dark thing going out in this world today. And we, as a Christian populace, have some sort of job. We could be out here doing something, dispersing light, rather than hiding our heads in the sand and watching American Idol and stupid television shows, when we could actually be doing something positive for this country.
Oh, definitely, Steve. And there's organizations out there that Christians can even look at. There's a group, Not for Sale, which has a lot of evangelical Christian members who actually try and buy people out of sex slavery from massage parlors and brothels and things like that. So there is a lot as Christians we can do and we must do, because these are all God's children who are being raped and murdered by these sick people. And even there's not a criminal organization I've seen that doesn't have some kind of Luciferian occult initiation. The mafia, they burn the picture of a Catholic saint and says, as this card so burns, so shall I burn. So they're all kind of diabolical. So we have to, as Christians, guard against them and do what we can to stop their evil tide over us.
All right. Well, Brother Kennedy, it's been a very fascinating interview today. And again, your website is WilliamHKennedy.com, and there's plenty of resources on there to keep somebody busy for a number of hours. So I just want to tell the listening audience to check that out. And Brother Kennedy, I do wish you the best. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you. Bye, Steve.
Bye-bye. God bless.